June 13, 1944. Near Carentan, Normandy, the fog came first. It rolled across the Norman fields like a ghostly tide, swallowing hedgerows, fences, and the shapes of men crouched beneath their weight of gear. The morning was still, yet beneath that stillness pulsed a dull metallic growl. Slow, rhythmic, unmistakable. A Tiger tank. The paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division had been awake for hours. Their boots were caked in mud, rifles damp with dew, nerves pulled taut by the unseen movement in the mist. Somewhere beyond the gray curtain, German armor prowled toward Carentan, the vital junction between the American beaches of Utah and Omaha. If Carentan fell, the entire link between the beachheads would fracture. A lone bird cried in the distance, then silence again. The sound of treads thickened closer now, crushing stones, grinding wet soil. The men could feel it through their boots, like a heartbeat of steel. They had no armor of their own, no tanks to answer the roar, only their rifles, grenades, and a handful of new weapons that few had tested under real fire. The M1 bazooka. A private fingered the cold tube, its surface slick with condensation. Somewhere behind him, a sergeant whispered a prayer neither for victory nor survival, but for resolve. The Tiger appeared, black silhouette in white mist, its 88mm cannon sweeping slowly left to right, a beast born of industrial precision and terror. For a moment it seemed untouchable, a symbol of everything the Germans believed indestructible. But fog has its own kind of mercy. It hides the weak, blinds the strong, and beneath its cover, American paratroopers began to move, not in retreat, but in silence toward the source of the sound. The fog would lift soon, and with it, the illusion of German invincibility. By mid-June 1944, the Allied invasion of Normandy had achieved what many thought impossible: a foothold on continental Europe. But that foothold was fragile. The beaches were secure, yet the land beyond them was a maze of hedgerows. Dense, ancient earthen walls lined with thick brush, each one a natural fortress. The town of Carentan, lying between Utah and Omaha beaches, was the missing link that would unite the American forces landing on either side. Without it, the divisions could not merge into a single front, and the Germans could still drive a wedge between them. For the U.S. commanders, the order was clear: take Carentan at any cost. Opposing them were the seasoned men of Fallschirmjäger Regiment 6. Elite German paratroopers who had fought in Crete and Italy. They were supported by elements of the Panzer Lehr Division, whose Tiger and Panzer IV tanks were among the most feared weapons in Europe. To the Americans, the Tiger was not just another tank, it was a myth made of metal, capable of annihilating anything within a mile. The 101st Airborne had dropped into Normandy on June 6th, scattered and disoriented. Yet still they gathered in the dark, forming new units from whoever they found alive. By June 12th, they had reached the outskirts of Carentan, exhausted and bloodied, having fought through flooded fields and sniper fire. Now, as dawn broke on June 13th, the Germans counterattacked. Columns of armor and infantry moved through the mist toward the town, hoping to drive the lightly armed Americans back into the sea. The paratroopers dug in among the hedgerows, barely visible through the morning haze. They had no tanks, no heavy artillery, only determination and a few crates of new rocket launchers flown in days earlier. Those launchers, the M1A1 bazooka, were still unproven against a Tiger's thick armor. The men had been briefed on where to aim: the rear engine plate, the treads, the vision slits. But theory meant little when the ground trembled under 56 tons of German steel. And yet this confrontation was inevitable. The most powerful tank in the world was about to meet men whose courage was the only armor they had. In the fog outside Carentan, the line between hunter and hunted was about to blur. For the men of the 101st Airborne, Carentan was more than a town. It was a test of endurance. They had landed behind enemy lines a week earlier, many without supplies, separated from their platoons, navigating through the night by the sound of gunfire. By June 13th, most were running on days of little sleep and fewer rations. Rain had turned the ground into a soft paste of mud. Their uniforms clung to their bodies, heavy with water and grime. But worse than the exhaustion was the waiting. That quiet dread before battle, when every sound in the fog seemed alive with meaning. The paratroopers had learned to use the Norman bocage to their advantage. Each hedgerow became both cover and trap. Soldiers would dig shallow foxholes along the banks, listening for the low rumble of treads beyond the green walls. Communication lines were short, coordination almost impossible. Units fought in isolation, guided by instinct and the occasional burst of tracer fire marking the enemy's approach. Across the fields, the German counterattack gathered force. The Panzer Lehr Division, considered one of Germany's most elite armored formations, advanced methodically, their tanks fanning out behind screens of infantry. To them, this was the moment to crush the airborne boys who had dared to challenge the Wehrmacht's pride. The Tiger tanks, newly arrived from the east, were supposed to end the fight in a single blow. But arrogance is a quiet poison in war. The Germans expected panic. They expected the Americans to retreat before the sight of the Tiger's black cross emerging through fog. What they found instead were soldiers who refused to yield. Men crouched behind hedgerows, rockets ready, waiting for the precise distance where courage and death shared the same breath. In those minutes before contact, the battlefield belonged to sound. The hiss of rain, the low throb of engines, the faint metallic clink of a safety latch sliding open. To the Americans, each sound was a countdown, and beneath it all lay something deeper. The knowledge that this small fight, in a forgotten corner of France, would shape the future of the entire invasion. The fog thinned, revealing silhouettes moving through the white veil. Paratroopers tightened their grips. Somewhere among them, a young soldier pressed his cheek to the cold steel of his bazooka and whispered to no one, "Come on!" Then, the Tiger was coming, and history would remember what happened next. The German Tiger tank was a marvel of engineering, a fortress on tracks, boasting 100 millimeters of frontal armor and an 88-millimeter cannon capable of tearing through Allied armor at distances no Sherman could match. To face it on open ground was suicide, but the paratroopers at Carentan were not on open ground. They were in the bocage, a labyrinth built by centuries of farmers, now turned into a killing maze. Here, visibility shrank to a few yards. Tanks could not maneuver freely. Their guns could not depress low enough to hit men hidden in ditches or behind earthen walls. This was the landscape of the infantrymen, where every hedge could conceal life or death. The human angle of this battle was one of raw defiance. These were not armored divisions or veteran tank crews. Many were young Americans barely out of training, airborne troops armed for quick strikes, not stand-up fights against armor. Yet when orders came to hold the line, they obeyed. Some crouched with rifles, others with bazookas they had never fired in combat. What they lacked in firepower, they compensated for with audacity and instinct. As the fog thickened, squad leaders whispered directions, drawing invisible maps in the mud. Every hedgerow became a boundary, every gap an ambush point. Men passed spare rockets along the line, marking positions for crossfire. They knew they could not outrun the Tigers, but they could outthink them. The tactical angle was clear. Use the terrain, strike fast, disappear. The fog gave them that chance. It dulled the Tiger's vision, muffled its approach, and hid movement that would have been suicide under clear skies. When the first tank emerged through the mist, its turret sweeping blindly, the paratroopers waited until it was close enough to smell the fuel. They would not stop the German advance with numbers, but with precision. One well-placed shot, one moment of perfect timing. In the fields outside Carentan, ingenuity was about to challenge engineering. To the German crews, the Tiger was a statement of supremacy. It was heavy, slow, and loud, but it inspired fear long before it fired. Each crewman trusted the thickness of the armor more than luck itself. The 80mm gun had already carved its legend across the Eastern Front, destroying Soviet T-34s by the hundreds. Against lightly armed paratroopers, they believed the fight was already won. But Normandy was not the Eastern Front. the terrain conspired against their might. The bocage nullified long-range gunnery and the fog stripped away visibility. The very advantages of the Tiger, its gun range, its armor, its power, became burdens in a fight measured in meters. Meanwhile, the Americans held a quiet advantage of their own: innovation. The M1A1 bazooka, barely 2 years old, represented a new kind of warfare. Lightweight, shoulder-fired, and cheap to produce, it was the infantryman's answer to armor. Each rocket carried a shaped charge warhead that could burn through metal thicker than any bullet could pierce. Its design was crude, but its promise revolutionary: to give a single soldier the power to destroy a tank. In the hands of the paratroopers, the bazooka became more than a weapon. It became a symbol of American resourcefulness. They modified the sights, wrapped the tubes in burlap to muffle glare, and learned through trial and error where the Tiger was weakest: the rear exhaust ports, the treads, the undercarriage. From the German perspective, the first hit was a shock. When the Tiger's flank erupted in flame, the crew thought it must have been artillery or an airstrike. The idea that foot soldiers could do such damage defied everything they believed about armored warfare. A second rocket followed, then a third. Panic replaced confidence. Through the smoke, they saw shadows moving. Men without tanks, but armed with courage and precision. The Tiger's engine screamed as it tried to turn in the narrow lane, its treads clawing at wet earth. It was too late. In that instant, the myth cracked, and for the Germans inside, it was the first time they felt what their enemies had long endured: the terror of being hunted. From that moment, the battlefield belonged not to the heaviest machine, but to the sharpest mind. The first Tiger appeared just after 0700 hours. Its silhouette loomed through the fog like a black ship drifting across a gray sea. Behind it, smaller panzers followed in formation, their engines growling in unison. The ground vibrated beneath every tread. For the paratroopers hidden along the hedgerows, time slowed into a single heartbeat. At the far end of the field, Sergeant Paul Thomas, one of the few men who had trained with the bazooka before the invasion, waited with his loader. They had positioned themselves near a narrow lane, barely 20 yards from where the lead tank would pass. The air smelled of diesel and damp soil. Drops of rain clung to the launcher's dull green surface. Thomas exhaled slowly. The Tiger's main gun pivoted to the left, scanning for movement. It saw none. The fog was too thick, the terrain too tangled. That moment of blindness was all the Americans needed. Fire! The order broke the stillness. The bazooka roared, a streak of white smoke slicing the mist. The rocket struck just behind the turret ring, a lucky angle. A sharp crack echoed, followed by a deep metallic groan. The Tiger shuddered, its engine coughing black smoke. The paratroopers erupted in movement. Another team shifted positions, firing at the treads to immobilize it. The fog filled with flashes, orange and white bursts cutting through the gray. The Tiger's machine gun spat blindly into the hedges, bullets snapping branches and soil. Yet the paratroopers were already gone, moving to their next firing point. A second hit punched through the rear engine deck. Fire burst from the vents, licking the sky. Inside, the German crew scrambled to escape. A hatch flew open, followed by a man engulfed in smoke and oil. For the first time in the campaign, a Tiger burned in full view of men who had once feared even its shadow. Across the field, the other tanks hesitated. The invincible machine was no longer untouchable. The Americans had done the impossible, not through numbers or armor, but through precision, patience, and sheer nerve. And as the Tiger smoldered in the mist, the balance of fear began to shift. The Tiger's destruction sent shockwaves through the field. German infantry faltered, unsure whether to advance or retreat. The fog, once their shield, now hid unseen threats. Every hedgerow, every rise of ground, could conceal another bazooka team waiting in silence. The aura of invincibility that had followed the panzer divisions across Europe cracked that morning outside Carentan. The paratroopers pressed their advantage with calculated fury. Small squads moved in arcs, cutting through side lanes and drainage ditches. The air was thick with cordite and smoke, but their discipline never wavered. They fought like ghosts, appearing for a second, firing, then vanishing again. From the command post, observers reported the sight of flames blooming through the fog, followed by a second Tiger disabled near the La Madeleine Causeway. German radio chatter, later intercepted, captured the confusion. Reports of new American weapons, capable of piercing even the heaviest armor. For the first time, the Tiger's reputation worked against it. Every tank commander hesitated to move forward, fearing ambush. The sound that dominated the battlefield was no longer the heavy rumble of treads, but the distinct hiss and thud of bazooka fire, that hollow breath before the explosion. It became the new rhythm of resistance, echoing across fields where no tanks dared linger. When the fog finally lifted, the field was a mosaic of wreckage: smoking armor, broken fences, churned mud. Among it, paratroopers walked with quiet disbelief. They had held their ground with weapons barely heavier than a rifle, against machines that symbolized German might. For the Germans, the image of a burning Tiger was not merely a tactical loss. It was psychological devastation. It proved that even the most engineered terror could bleed, could burn, could fail. And in that revelation, the war in Normandy turned a subtle but irreversible corner. When reports reached headquarters that a Tiger had been destroyed by airborne infantry, disbelief came first, then pride. At the 101st Command Post near Carentan, officers reviewed accounts from platoon leaders and intelligence scouts. They confirmed 2 German Tigers disabled, several panzers abandoned, and the enemy's counterattack broken. What had begun as a desperate defense by underarmed paratroopers had become one of the most symbolic American stands of the Normandy campaign. The success was not measured in territory gained, but in morale. Word spread quickly through the ranks and along the beachheads. "The Tigers can burn." That phrase, passed between soldiers, carried a power no propaganda could match. It meant the myth of invincibility had been shattered by ordinary men with extraordinary nerve. For the 101st, the cost was steep. Dozens lay wounded or dead in the hedgerows they had defended. Their gear was soaked, their ears still ringing from explosions that had come too close. Yet as medics moved through the fog-shrouded field, no one spoke of retreat or loss. The paratroopers knew they had faced one of the most feared machines in modern warfare, and won. After-action reports later recorded how the combination of fog, terrain, and portable anti-tank weapons had offset the Tiger's mechanical superiority. The Americans had turned what seemed like chaos into advantage. The official summary was dry, almost clinical. But behind those words was a story of endurance, of soldiers who refused to give ground. Meanwhile, German command in the sector faced a grim realization. The failed counterattack meant that the link between Utah and Omaha beaches would hold. The Allies now controlled a continuous front, capable of bringing in reinforcements and armor in vast numbers. The fog had cleared over Carentan, and with it, Germany's last chance to drive the invaders back into the sea. But for the men who fought there, victory was not triumph. It was survival paid in blood and silence. In the days that followed, the fields around Carentan bore the smell of burnt oil and wet grass. The wreckage of the Tigers became landmarks, twisted symbols of a turning tide. French civilians, emerging cautiously from their cellars, spoke of the blackened hulks as iron beasts slain by lightning. To them, it was the first visible proof that the Germans could be beaten on their own soil. German engineers later inspected the destroyed tanks. Their reports were terse and bitter. The armor had been breached by concentrated infantry-launched shaped charges. It was a phrase that masked the humiliation of defeat. For years, the Tiger had been Germany's pride, its mechanical god of war. Now, under the gray sky of Normandy, it lay gutted by the weapon of a single man. Within the Wehrmacht, the loss carried a psychological weight far beyond the battlefield. Tank crews began to question their safety. Infantry units hesitated to advance without overwhelming numbers. Even commanders like General Bayerlein of Panzer, Lair noted the increasing boldness of American infantry and the growing ineffectiveness of armor in enclosed terrain. The myth of armored invincibility had fractured, not by superior tanks, but by superior adaptability. Meanwhile, the 101st Airborne regrouped and advanced toward new objectives. Their ranks thinned, uniforms torn. They carried with them the memory of that morning fog, and the sound of the bazooka's echo that changed the fight. For the rest of the Normandy campaign, that sound would serve as both weapon and warning. Each time a bazooka fired, it told the same truth. The age of the lone, unstoppable tank was ending. The battlefield now belonged to ingenuity, coordination, and courage, values born not of machines, but of men. As the sun returned over Carentan, glinting on fields once shrouded in mist, the paratroopers stood among the ruins of what had been the German army's pride. They had faced the tiger and turned its roar into silence. And in that silence, a new confidence was born, the quiet strength of a force that now knew it could not be broken. In the quiet days that followed, Normandy's fields began to breathe again. Smoke drifted upward from the blackened husks of tanks, and the morning fog returned, softer now, harmless. For those who had survived, the memory of that fog would never fade. It had been the curtain between fear and resolve, between myth and reality. The Tiger tank, once the embodiment of German invincibility, had met its match not in superior machinery, but in human imagination. Its armor was thicker, its gun deadlier, its engine a masterpiece of precision. Yet all of it meant little against a soldier willing to crawl through mud with a 6-foot launcher and the will to try. The weapon that destroyed it, the bazooka, became more than a tool of war. It was the echo of a larger idea, that in democracy, power could belong to the individual. Every rocket fired that morning symbolized the same truth, that ingenuity, not intimidation, would decide the future of the war. The Americans who fought at Carentan did not see themselves as heroes. They saw only the duty to hold their ground. But their defiance carried an unspoken message that rippled far beyond Normandy. That even the greatest machines of tyranny can fall before the courage of free men. For the Germans who witnessed it, the burning tigers were not just lost vehicles. They were omens. They revealed the vulnerability of a nation that had believed too deeply in the strength of steel and too little in the strength of spirit. The fog that had once hidden their advance now concealed their defeat, and when it lifted, the illusion of supremacy was gone. Decades later, the image of that smoldering tiger still speaks. It tells of the moment when the machine age met its reckoning, when technology bowed to determination, and when the noise of engines gave way to the quiet resolve of human will. The paratroopers of the 101st left Carentan to fight on through France, Holland, and the frozen forests of Bastogne. Many never returned home, yet in the story of that morning, their courage endures. In every field where liberty demanded courage stronger than armor, and in every generation that remembers what freedom costs. As dawn breaks over Normandy even now, mist still gathers among the hedgerows, and somewhere, in that soft silence, the echo of a single bazooka round whispers across time, a reminder that freedom's fiercest weapons are not forged in factories, but in the hearts of those who refuse to yield. That day outside Carentan, America did more than win a battle. It proved that even the thickest armor cannot withstand the fire of belief.